Alright, so here we are in exercise 11, and this exercise is solely dedicated to a feature in Illustrator called image trace. Image trace was formerly called live trace, and it's a function that allows you to convert raster-based images into vector-based images. So what Illustrator is doing is it's interpreting the values in a raster image, and it's interpreting the difference between those values. So let's say in this sky, the value of this darker value of blue compared to this white, and it will analyze those differences and then create a vector path between them. And so that's essentially what it's doing when it analyzes a photo. So we're going to look at things that we can control when we do an image trace. So things like how much of the pixel information we want the computer to interpret, the amount of paths and points that are traced, and the corners, the sharpness and smoothness, the amount of detail, and even the amount of color and value that we want to have in the trace. So that's what we're going to be going over. Like effects, after you complete an image trace and you're satisfied with the outcome, we're going to expand the object to be able to fully edit it after the image trace. Alright, so we'll come down here. We're going to start here with the photo trace option. Let's see how we do this. So I'm going to use my black arrow, and I'm going to select this image that I've imported into Illustrator. I did File, Place, and I put this image in, and then I went ahead and embedded the image. So when you embed an image, that means you link it directly to the Illustrator file, and you can find that up here in the control panel. So if I were to click unembed, that means that this image here would be linked to another folder in my computer, so that whenever I updated that file, it would try to update that in Illustrator. But for now, we're just going to keep this embedded. Okay, so I'm going to click on the image first, and then I'll come up here to my control panel, and right here, we have an option for image trace. Now you could just click on the image trace and let the computer decide what it wants to do with the photo, but in this case we're going to click the down facing arrow and get the tracing presets. So I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to get this list of all these presets for image trace. I'm going to choose this first one, high fidelity photo. Now just to warn you guys, if you're working with a computer that has maybe low memory or not a large processor, sometimes this can take a little while because the computer is processing a lot of information. If you happen to have a slow computer, just be patient. Okay, so I'll click high fidelity photo, and right now it's calculating a lot of different things with the values in this image. Alright, and this completed the image trace, although we can't even see it because it is such a detailed rendering of all of the values that it looks almost exactly like a raster-based photo. So I'm going to grab the zoom tool, and I'll click and drag right here on this part of the tree, and now you can see that this actually reinterpreted everything as vector paths. So you can see they're slightly abstracted shapes. Okay, so I'll zoom out, and now that I've created a vector-based image, I'm going to expand it. So I'll come up here to the control panel and I'll click expand. So it's going to actually finally convert these all to editable paths. I can see all the details of the paths if I hit Command and Y. This is called outline mode, and it's in this mode that we can really see what has happened with this image. I'll hit Command Y again to get out of there. You can also find that in View and Outline. Okay, let's try a similar image trace, but this time we're going to do it with less fidelity or less paths. So I'll click on this one. I'll go up to the control panel. I'll click on the tracing presets and go to low fidelity. It said the tracing may proceed slowly with this large image. We'll just say okay. And this one should be a little bit faster than the high fidelity photo, which is the most detail you can get from an image trace. Alright, so this one you can see a little bit more of the graphic breakup of that image. This is a good candidate for some further adjustments using our image trace panel. So with this selected, I'm going to come back to the control panel, and I'm going to look for this icon right here. This is the image trace panel. So if I click on this, what we're looking at here is all the different options for customizing this. Now right up here, these are some more presets. I could have this as a high color preset, low color, grayscale, black and white, and outline. And then we can also find these right here. These are more presets similar to what we were just looking at. We can also view different kinds of results. We can review the tracing with the outlines around it, just the outlines only, and outlines with the source image. Go ahead and try this one, outlines. So you can see it took away all the color information and now it's just giving us the path outlines. I'll go back to just tracing result. We are in color. I could switch this to grayscale and it takes just a moment. Alright, it pretty much took away all the color hues and now we're just left with values. Now if you look right here, we can actually adjust the amount of grays in this image. So if I pull this down, and once again it's going to take some time to reinterpret that. So you can see it simplified the amount of value breakup of those gray values. You could say it's making it less detailed and more kind of abstract reductive. I'll go ahead and expand this, and after you expand it, it is all grouped together. So if I right click and do ungroup, I'll click outside and then I'll come in and just select individual shapes. Alright, so let's move on down. Let's try some more presets. So let's modify the amount of colors that the computer interprets in the trace. I'll choose this first one, okay, the one for 3 colors. I'll go to Image Trace Presets, and I'll go to the 3 colors. So what the computer did is it averaged out the color values that it was reading, and it picked the 3 colors that were dominant in this piece, and it basically made a tracing that only included those 3 colors. Now if I wanted to, in the image trace panel, I could start to move this color scrub over and start to add more colors back into it. So I could move this up to, let's say, 5, and there you can see it broke up the colors into more color hues. Alright, so let's move on to this next one over here, these 6 colors. I'll go ahead and select that, and this time I'll just do it right here from my image trace panel. Come down to the 6 colors, and I will wait patiently while the computer calculates that. Okay, so now that we know we can limit the color palette, let's look at a few more options that we have. So right next to the word advanced is a triangle. Toggle that down, it's going to give us some more options. So the first option we see right here is called paths. So this is basically the amount of paths that we're looking at in the image trace. Let's go ahead and pull this down to low, and then after you do that, it's going to recalculate it again. Essentially, it extracted details out of the image and made this a little less detailed and more refined. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on some parts of this, and let's adjust the corners. So I'm going to bring this all the way down to less corners. Okay, so it's a little hard to notice, but what it did is it went in and all of those sharp points, it came in and rounded those off, and it's creating more of a kind of cartoony, bubbly image trace. I'll go ahead and bring that up all the way and see what it gives me. Alright, and so now it kind of abstracted things more geometrically, and I like that. So I'll go ahead and expand that. Alright, so let's try one more color photo. So just a warning, guys, before you start this image trace, if your computer's been running slow to trace these other 2 images, just go ahead and watch as I do this one. Otherwise, you might be waiting for quite a while for your computer to complete this. So I'll select this one. Let's try 16 colors. We'll just click OK, and we'll wait. Alright, and so we can see this has reduced it into 16 colors. And wow, that took a long time, but these are the results. So it's kind of a cool graphic look. I like how it reduced the amount of colors within the cliff face right here, and then it added these kind of graphic breakups of this vegetation over the top. Alright, so I'm going to come down here and let's do another grayscale. So this time I'll just use the preset for grayscale. I'll select this one and I'll go preset, shades of gray. Alright, and let's play around a little bit with the noise. So if I bring the noise up, what this is doing is it's telling the computer to reduce the amount of noise by saying don't trace anything that is less than 100 pixels. If you look right here on the slide, this has kind of been refined more than the original trace. If I bring this all the way down to 1, now you can see on this slide it is actually traced a lot more value breakups here and within the bush vegetation or the tree vegetation here. So just know that the noise is the size of the group of pixels that it's going to trace. Alright, let's move on over. Okay, so this is a really useful one. So a lot of the times you might do some hand-drawn type or logo, and you want to take that and make that the basis for a vector shape that you start to refine. Let's go ahead and click on this image For the preset, we are going to go to black and white logo and see what it gives us. All right, so not bad. Now, one thing that you want to make sure that you click when you do a trace like this is right down here in options. We want to click ignore white because we don't want to have to deal with the white background. We only want to deal with the dark values of our logo shape. Let's go ahead and play around with, let's go ahead and see what our tracing result with outlines looks like. And I'll zoom in just a little bit. So we actually want to reduce the amount of noise in here. We don't want all these little specks. So let's go ahead and bring the noise all the way up. All right, that looks a lot better. And let's bring the paths down to low because we want things to be smoother. Okay, let's bring the corners just about to the middle. And maybe I'll bring a little bit less corners in there. I'm looking right here at these kind of loops and I'm trying to get those a little bit smoother. And like any kind of automated image creation, it's not perfect. We're definitely going to have to come in here and refine some things. So we can see this is getting pretty close to more of a refined kind of mock logo. I'll go ahead and increase what's called the threshold. Basically going to increase the amount of midtone values that it's going to trace over. Alright, so that one filled in all of that little noise in between, but it also filled in these midtone values over here. And that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and expand that, and now these are editable vector paths. I'll go ahead and ungroup that, and I'll use my black arrow and start selecting this large bottom shape and deleting out these pieces. And then I'll zoom in. You can see we have a lot of spots that we would need to refine. I'll go ahead and just kind of demonstrate refining part of the Y right here, just to kind of show how you might go about dealing with this. So I'm going to use my white arrow, and one tool I could use to start the process of kind of smoothing this out is one that we've used before. So if I go over here to my shaper tool, I click and hold down, find the smooth tool. It's right below your pencil tool. When I have that selected, I'll hold down on the command key and I will select the paths that I want to affect. So in this case, it's this part of the Y. I'll zoom in a little bit more. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag over parts of this Y edge. And I'm going to try to get these parts smoothed out. Now, if it's not smoothing enough, I can double click on that tool and make sure the fidelity is all the way over here on smooth. And then I'll click OK. And I'll just start dragging over parts of this. So there, that smoothed that out a little bit more. And so eventually, the best way of refining this is coming in with the white arrow and massaging these paths. Usually that involves actually deleting a lot of points, because more points give it kind of a rough look, and in this case I don't need a lot of these points. I can delete those. I can take this point and start to drag the control handles. And so you can see the limitations with this method. You know, is it a better idea just to trace this whole thing instead of going through and editing these paths? In some cases, that's probably a better way to go. In other cases where things are really custom and need kind of a hand-drawn look, sometimes this is the best way of going about that. I'll go ahead and just refine this just a little bit more. Remember, you're going to get smoother curves with a longer control handle. Pull this one out. I think I'm going to delete that one, and I'll just click this control handle and pull that one out, pull that one out. This is just good practice for refining vector paths. All right, I'll zoom out. Okay, and there you can see that took a little bit of time, but I'm able to achieve the likeness of what I had in the drawing. Okay. So let's move along. All right, and so we'll come down over here and we'll start working with this next image called Sketched Art. So I'll click on that and let's try the preset of Sketched Art. And so by default, it is putting it in a black and white mode. So it's basically changing this all to kind of like a pen and ink on white paper. Make sure that Ignore White has been chosen. And if I really wanted to give this a sketchbook quality, I would want to change the mode into Grayscale. And you can see as I did that it brought back some of those other values that were missing. But let's just go ahead and keep this on black and white. And make sure that we have Ignore White. I might want to increase the threshold just a little bit more, because I can see we're losing a little bit of details up here in the head. All right. So I like that. I'll go ahead and expand it. And now that that has been expanded and it's all a big group, I can see right here that by default, it's in black. If I wanted to, I could actually start to change the colors. So if I wanted maybe a sketch and I wanted some just crazy, wacky color behind it, I'll go ahead and choose some magenta. I could change that sketch into this colored abstraction. All right, let's move on to the next one. So I'll choose this photo, and this one is silhouettes. So we'll try this preset. And what this preset is going to do is it's going to try to pull out silhouettes of people and objects. Now, right now, the threshold is too high. I'm at 230. I actually need to bring this down. And there you can see it's taking away any of the background images, and it's trying to just leave me with silhouettes of the people in this photo. So I'll increase it a little bit more and see how much I can go before we get too much of the background information. That's pretty good. Go ahead and increase the noise just a little bit. All right. I'll go ahead and expand that and ungroup. I'll zoom in a little bit. And this time I'll use my white arrow and I'll delete some of the paths that I don't need. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting this set of paths and then deleting the anchors. Maybe I'll select that little hook coming off of his arm and delete those anchors. There we can see it's refining that. Delete anchors. That'll be good for that one. Okay, let's try this one. So this one I kind of grouped together, line art and technical drawing, and I'll zoom in so we can see a little bit more. And let's go ahead and do line art. And because it's going to try to just get the outlines of this image, it's going to take a little while to kind of calculate those. I'll just click OK. All right, it kind of reduced it a little too much. So let's go in here and modify some of these options. So I'll go ahead and increase the amount of paths, and I'll actually decrease the stroke. So right over here, I'll bring this down to 20 and hit return. I'll increase the threshold so I can pull in more details of some of these other lines. All right, so that brought in a lot more detail. And I'll increase the noise, and I'll go ahead and ignore the white. All right, so there you can see that's about as good as we can get for just putting outlines on a drawn image. To be honest, I think this could be done a lot better, but as a good first start, this is coming along. Alright, so I'll go down here and we'll finish up with using the image trace to create a texture. So right here I kind of have this weathered stone texture, and I want to be able to take this and put it over this sidewalk shape. I also want to be able to change the color of this texture. So let's go ahead and give that a try. I'm going to click this, and instead of using the presets, I'm just going to come in here and start to actually customize this vector texture. So I'll just go ahead and click image trace, okay, and this is what it's giving me by default, and we'll kind of analyze this and see what we need to do. So right now I think it needs a little more detail, so I'll increase the threshold. I'll increase the amount of paths, about 80%. I'll increase the noise, so I'll bring this all the way down to 1 pixel. And I think that's pretty good. The last thing I need to do is ignore the white. Okay, so now that we've successfully done the image trace, and this is now what I want to use, I need to expand it. So I'll hit the expand button, and now we can edit it. I'm going to go ahead and keep this as a group. And if you look over here, we have the sidewalk color on another layer, and we actually have the outline of the path on our drawing layer. So I'm going to use that outline as a clipping mask. So I'll go ahead and just arrange that to the front. Right click, arrange, bring to front, so that I can use that as a clipping mask. And then I'll take this group and I'll move it over. So I'll rotate this into place, and I'll kind of stretch this out so it just covers most of the sidewalk. So something like that. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to my free transform tool, and I'm going to choose this perspective distort, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this part in, and I will pull this part out. Now we're getting more of a 1-point perspective along that sidewalk path. I'll click V for my black arrow, and I'll kind of move this a little bit more. Kind of stretch this out using just my black arrow tool. Alright, and then I'm going to go ahead, since this is a group, I will change the colors on that. I'll try something close to the value of the sidewalk. Alright, and so now that I have that in place, I will choose the path on top of the outline. I'll hold down the shift key and choose that vector texture, and then I'll right click and make a clipping mask. Alright. I might double click on this and I'll get into that isolation mode. I'll click on that vector texture again. I'll double click the color picker and bring up the value a little bit more, just so it's a little more subtle. Bring it up to about right there and see how that looks. Oh, cool. It kind of looks like a shadow from a tree being cast on there. I'll hit the escape key. And now that I have that value set, I'm going to go in one more time. So I'll double click and then I'll click that texture. And I'm going to change what's called the blending mode. So we'll go over this in the other exercise, but just to introduce you to that, I'm going to come over here to this panel called the transparency panel. Click and open that. And right here where it says normal, I'm going to click that open and choose multiply. And then I'm going to bring down the opacity about 50%. I'll click outside and then hit the escape key. And there we have a sidewalk object with a little bit of this texture showing through. So this is something that you could use to give more life to your objects, bringing in textures and changing the blending mode on those. So hopefully I didn't break your guys' computers doing all these image processing with the live trace tool.